Welcome back to another episode of the Meat Mafia podcast. If this is your first time joining us, we have one goal and one goal only, and that is that you, yes you, listen to this podcast and get at least one valuable piece of information that inspires you to go radically change your health today. If this is your second, third, fourth, or 100th time listening to the Meat Mafia podcast, we are so grateful to have you, and we are so thankful for your continued support. Before we get going, if you would not mind going and following us on all of our platforms, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and of course, Twitter, we would greatly appreciate it. This just allows us to expand our reach, and your reviews, comments, and feedback give us more and more things to think about and improve the show with. Lastly, this is a user-supported podcast and newsletter, and we would not be able to do what we love doing without your generous support and the support from our sponsors. We take great pride in the relationships that we've built with our sponsors and truly believe that they are the best resources out there for better health. Your support and their support, and you supporting them, means the world to us. If you are enjoying the podcast and getting value out of it, please check us out on the Fountain app below, where you can support us by streaming us sats or sending us support via our Fountain Bitcoin wallet. Without further ado, here is a word from our sponsors. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Carnivore Bar. The Carnivore Bar is a veteran-owned animal-based company focused on bringing you the highest quality pemmican product on the market. Pemmican is an ancient tradition practiced by American indigenous cultures, and it's focused on simple ingredients: beef, tallow, and salt. It's built for grab-and-go snacking, and it's a great sort of travel, hiking, or school lunch snack. And it's really built for those long-lasting days where you can just run on basically no fuel other than just simple fats. It's rich in saturated fats and provides everything you need to sustain long-lasting energy throughout the busy day. In my opinion, this is a product that is an absolute must, so go check it out in the link below. Also, check out our podcast with the founder, Philip Meese. He does an incredible job breaking down the mission and the passion behind the company. And I think if you're interested in animal-based nutrition, Philip will inspire you with his product. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Holy Cow Beef. Holy Cow Beef is regeneratively raised, grass-fed, grass-finished beef raised right here in Lubbock, Texas. Regeneratively raised, grass-fed, grass-finished beef is the gold standard of beef, and Ann and Weldon Warren have made it their lives' mission to provide incredibly high-quality beef to their local community and beyond. They have been raising their animals this way for decades. In fact, they were some of the most influential voices for getting grass-fed and grass-finished beef in Whole Foods back when Whole Foods was a startup grocery store. They were influential in setting the AGA standards, which is the American Grass-Fed Association, so you know they are doing things the right way, and on top of all of that, their beef tastes like butter. Grass-fed, grass-finished beef provides a superior omega-3 to omega-6 ratio than your typical beef, or in other words, it causes less inflammation in your body. So you are promoting a high-protein, high-fat diet with this amazingly high-quality beef, and saturated fats are playing their critical role in benefiting your body through supporting hormonal functions and cellular functions. And if you're looking for the highest quality beef, look no further than Holy Cow Beef. Leave your butcher box, that Australian and New Zealand raised meat, in the cart and order from your friends Ann and Weldon Warren over at Holy Cow Beef. I almost forgot the most important part there. Ann and Weldon Warren also accept Bitcoin as payment, so go check them out at their website in the link below, and you can pay in Bitcoin or in cash if you're looking to save your Bitcoin. I don't know about you all, but I am all about rewriting the incentives when it comes to healthcare, and CrowdHealth is doing just that. CrowdHealth is essentially crowdfunding for healthcare with a small HSA component mixed in. Paying through the nose for health insurance you may never use, only to be turned away when you actually need it, is incredibly frustrating. Also, the exorbitant costs of health insurance has so many baked-in premiums that when you compare settling your doctor's bills by paying in cash versus using insurance, the cost is astronomical. So crowdfunding allows you to settle your medical bills in cash and then get the funding you need from your group through CrowdHealth. This is a great alternative to health insurance for people who are low-risk, healthy people who just want peace of mind knowing that if anything actually did happen, they do have a pool of funds to pull from to cover their medical costs. The best part? My group is saving a portion of the monthly opt-in in Bitcoin, and the rest is in cash. So those savings are going towards actually preserving long-term value for my group through a vehicle like Bitcoin. We are really excited about this concept, and since the business model is predicated on an incentive-based healthcare, it is a great concept. For people with low risk, minimal healthcare costs, it is a no-brainer. Go check them out in the link below and use our promo code MAFIA for a discount on your first 6 months with Crowd Health. Sam, welcome to the Meat Mafia podcast. Thanks for having us out to your farm here at Shirttail. This is great.
Yeah,
thanks. What's up? We got a guest star here. What's going on, you?
Here, Bodie, get down.
How are you,
We'll
Bodie?
put him out if we need to. Chocolate Lab jumping in.
Yeah.
No, but this has been awesome because we were fortunate because we were saying how I just moved to Austin.
Yeah.
And you had DM'd us about a week ago.
Yeah.
And we were like, yeah, we could do it over Zoom, but it would be so cool just to actually get to meet you and check out the property. So we spent the last hour getting to see the incredible operation and seeing the maiden of the ranch and everything. So it's been great.
Yeah. Dude, I'm glad you guys could make the drive.
Yeah. And I think on top of that, we've come across you at the Austin Farmers Market, which is honestly where we direct a lot of people to go when they ask us about how to get more engaged and involved with the food system. It's like, start with your farmer's market, go see who shows up, see who's there, ask those questions, and just get to know your farmer a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that would be a good place to start, just kind of your backstory in terms of how you got into farming, because, you know, we've been chatting all day about it, but you've had a cool journey into this process as a first generation farmer out here in Texas.
Yeah. Do you want me to put him out? Is this going to be?
No, he's good. He's
Okay.
good. He's good.
Well, you know, I told you about how, you know, my wife and I grew up in the suburbs. We didn't have experience farming. My mom's family grew wheat in Kansas, so I grew up around it a little bit. I had uncles that ranched and stuff. But I didn't grow up working on a farm. You know, we went to college. You know, I went to UT Austin. My wife went to college in California, UC Davis. And we, you know, we're living there. We worked at a tech company together, an ad tech business together, and, you know, had good careers leading up to this. And we'd always said that, you know, when we had kids, we wanted to raise them in the country and get out of the city. And you know, we were doing our thing in Austin, had 2 little kids, nice house, good job, you know, all the picture was set, like it looked the way it's supposed to look. And, you know, I wasn't super passionate about what I was doing. I had my own advertising business at the time. And Carolyn was participating in that with me. And, we went to take the kids to Callahan's in Austin. It's a feed store just outside of Austin, and they have like baby goats and chickens, you know. And we went to take the little kids to see the animals. And when we got back in the car, Carolyn said, yeah, you know, I think I'm ready to go do the farm thing.
And so you guys had been talking about that previously?
Yeah, it was like an idea for a long time, like to have a farm, you know, before we ever had kids. So me being the way I am, I like raced onto, you know, Zillow or whatever and started searching for properties because I was really wanted to live like outside of the city. And we found this place and moved here and really didn't have a specific plan for having like a full-on production, you know, commercial agriculture business, you know, producing a product and selling it to people. I thought we'd have some cows, and I grew up riding horses, and but you know, one thing led to another. Changes in my advertising business led me to kind of look for another path, and pretty quickly we were like just all in on pursuing the farm.
Wow.
And even then, like even when we made the leap to start the farm and like, okay, we're going to sell beef and eggs initially is what the plan was. You know, I tell people, I'm like, this wasn't like this is a money-making for-profit endeavor, but it didn't start off with that as the motivation.
Right.
It was like we wanted to find something we could do that we were passionate about, and then figure out how to make money off of it, kind of as a secondary thing. And I will tell you, that's probably not like a wise way to go about it. Like, we didn't have a business plan, but yeah, that's kind of how it went. So.
And so it started off more as maybe like a homestead type operation more than like a commercial operation. You're going to sell your eggs at the farmer's market and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we were going to always sell stuff, but it was smaller scale.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had a couple hundred hens. You know, we were going to slaughter 1 or 2 calves a month for meat. And now we do 15 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course a lot more hens. And so, it's the fear is always like, well, I don't know if I can sell all those eggs, so I'll start small. I don't know how much meat I can sell. And that's a healthy fear. And then once you kind of get a feel for what the market is for something, then you can kind of take it from there. But
yeah. I know one of the things that we mentioned prior to hitting record when we were just walking the property is how, you had an amazing career in advertising, and you ended up buying this property in 2017, and you were sitting in your career thinking that there was something else for you. So I'm just curious, when did you start to kind of like have those feelings in your head that maybe you were meant to be doing something else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I always wanted to be doing something else.
Yeah.
I think at my core, at most of our cores, we want to be doing something else other than what we're doing. And we're raised to think like you need to go to college and have a career path and make, $80,000 a year and have a mortgage and do all these things. Right. I kind of started seeing through that bullshit early, I guess. And in my early 20s, we kind of talked about this. Like, I was really into rock climbing and outdoor sports, and we'd go to Colorado and climb mountains, and go to Mexico and go rock climb and camp and just be free and do cool shit,
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I always felt the most fulfilled. And in college, I got a job right outside of Austin working at a farm for 3 years. And so, kid that didn't grow up I should say I did get some farming experience working on that farm. I forgot to mention that. But I'd go out and dig up broken water lines, build fence, clear brush, run a tractor with a shredder mower on it, just basic stuff, and just being outside every day. I worked my ass off. I'm 20 years old and not making much money, but that was like the best in terms of a job. Like, that was the most fulfilling job I ever had. And I never forgot that. And so going into the workforce, I worked for radio stations and then got into digital advertising. There's moments when you're in the office where there's a little lull and you're like, it's a cloudy day and you don't want to be there. And so, start watching YouTube videos of people surfing big waves or, climbing, El Capitan or something like that. And these people are just pursuing their passion, and they're just living a life that is full of purpose for them. And I always really wanted to find that. And but I also always wanted to have like financial security. And so, the side of me that wanted that was for a long time way stronger than the side of me that wanted to go be, free. And so anyway, we reached a point in our lives when the advertising business was changing, and we were in a better place to take a little bit of a risk, and pursuing the farm very quickly became the pursuit of that sort of passion for me.
Was it easy or clear to kind of see the farm as that passion when you guys got out here? Because I imagine there was probably like a few moments where it's like, oh wow, we're actually doing it.
Yeah, man. Well, it was like, it felt at times, it was definitely like a good check on the old ego.
Yeah.
Because we had the picture perfect kind of setup going on before, but again, we weren't really fulfilled. We didn't really identify with the life we were living. And, but yeah, man, there was a lot of times when it was like, 20 degrees and sleeting, and there's like broiler chickens, that got wet, that are dying, and it's midnight, and you really just want to be in your warm bed, but you're out there dealing with that shit. And that you go like, man, this kind of sucks. Like, was this the right move? But, always when you get to the other side of that, you look back, and I'm wired in such a way that when I get to the other side of those challenges, and I think a lot of people are, when you actually overcome those, you realize it really isn't that bad. And it feels really good to get to the other side of that.
Yeah. What is it like looking back on those early years purchasing the farm in 2017 and just thinking about how much progress you've made as a farmer and a rancher in that 5-year stretch?
Well, I'm lucky that I'm still married.
It seems like she likes it just as much as you do.
She does. She does, but she should be in here. I don't know. She hates being like on these sorts of things. So she's kind of hiding in the pasture, but no, it's, like there was a time, like growing anything is chaotic and stressful. And so like we start off with 225 birds, I think was our first batch. And then we're thinking, oh my God, they're going to lay like maybe 200 eggs a day. What the hell are we going to do with that? And then it's like, okay, 200 eggs a day. Okay, Carolyn goes out, collects the eggs, wash and pack them in the kitchen, take them to the farmer's market. Yeah, it's manageable, right? And then you ramp it up and it's like, we're getting, 1,000 eggs a day. And Carolyn's collecting them. By the way, I'm not doing nothing. I'm doing other stuff too, building fence and whatever. But Carolyn would spearhead that, and she'd collect the eggs, bring them in, and then it'd get to the point where it's like maybe collect a couple days worth of eggs, and then the kids go to bed, and then it's like 10 o'clock, and you got to wash and pack eggs in the kitchen, and it's late, and it's you're tired, and so yeah, there were a lot of those moments where it was challenging getting it going, but yeah.
What's been the most fulfilling part of the process, or maybe what's the most fulfilling part of your kind of like weekly, monthly process, whether it's the farmer's market or getting to see the animals actually kind of make an impact on the land, that sort of thing?
I really enjoy our beef program the most. And I think a lot of that's because that's what really got me dialed into what regenerative agriculture is and what it can do. I read a book called Dirt to Soil by Gabe Brown, really good book. And I've got a bunch of books that I really like, but that one really, like, it was a book where, and I'd already, we'd been doing this for a while when I started reading that book, and it's like every chapter I was like, oh, I want to put the book down and go get in the tractor and do whatever he said to do, but no, the beef production is my favorite part. And, having a forage plan and planting a mix of grasses and legumes and allowing them to coexist with pre-existing perennials and forbs and stuff, and watching the soil respond from having been overgrazed for a really long time, and then implementing a grazing program and watching the calves go from being, weaned calves to 1,000-pound steers that you can butcher, and then eating that meat, or better yet, getting feedback from somebody else that ate that ribeye and said, man, that was really good. Like that whole process is awesome for me. And it's not like one day out of the week. It's just like that whole part of what we do is what I love, because it's hard. Mm-hmm. And when you get it right, it's really exciting. So, that's the process I love the most.
Mm. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Equip Foods. Equip provides a complete source of grass-fed beef protein with no added chemicals, fillers, binding agents, or artificial coloring or sweeteners. If you're familiar with the supplement industry, you know that most supplements are loaded with ingredients that you can't even pronounce. Equip's Unflavored Prime has one single ingredient derived directly from grass-fed beef protein. For purists like ourselves who try to only consume balanced, real sources of nutrition, this protein powder checks all the boxes. Go check them out in the link below and use our promo code in the description to get a discount.
Yeah. You touched on that concept of regenerative, which is something we're always interested in exploring on the show, because it seems like there are a number of different definitions depending on who you ask. So I'm just curious, what would your definition of regenerative agriculture be?
Farming in the image of a healthy ecosystem. So, the goal is to farm in such a way where you're not doing harm. You're improving the land, you're raising healthy animals and producing healthy, nutrient-dense food. And it's a win-win for all parties involved, so.
Is there anything that because we're starting to see the regenerative labels get put out there a little bit more. So is there anything that you wish or want the consumers to know about kind of the definitions or what actually goes into regenerative versus the commercial conventional practices?
Man, I don't know. I'm seeing it too. It's important to ask questions. There's greenwashing is going to happen no matter where you go. I think I forgot what it was. I saw some packaged good the other day and it said regenerative on it, and it was like, I can't remember. It was ridiculous. I was like, how in the world could that be regenerative? And now I can't remember what it was. But what happens with these practices like grass-fed, organic, whatever, regenerative, I don't know if this has happened yet with regenerative, but it surely will if it hasn't, is that big corporations want to participate in that and put that label on their food, but they need some third party to validate that so that it's legit, right? And so they get on the board of those associations, and then they participate in defining what is and isn't. And like if you look at grass-fed associations guidelines, and nothing wrong with grass-fed association, by the way, they permit lots of inputs that, if people realize that was getting used, they might think twice about buying from certain producers. Cotton seed, soybean hulls, things like that. Usually, those things are allowed in a time of extreme drought or, whatever. And I get that you need some sort of plan B or plan C because your hands are tied in a grass-fed operation. But there's, I'm weary.
Yeah. So that you're saying that there's loopholes and things that could be going on behind the scenes that you can get away with, but still label your product as regenerative technically?
Well, right now, I don't know if anybody's regulating the use of the word regenerative on food labels. And even grass-fed is not regulated. Although if you've got the Grass-Fed Association stamp, then at least you're meeting their requirements. I think it's just important for people to understand what those requirements really are. Like we talked about, when people go to the store, we used to forage based on like our knowledge of what foods were desirable and which ones weren't, and which ones made us sick and which ones didn't. And now it's like, which one has the pretty label with the natural paper and the pretty animal on it. And it says natural and says all the words that make me feel good. And, man, like, what do those really mean in the context of that label? I think people need to think about that and dig into that.
Yeah. One of the things that we were talking about prior to hitting record is we were talking about just your passion for going to the farmer's market and how much you love just connecting with customers and teaching them about their food and things that they should be asking their ranchers and farmers when they're thinking about making their purchases. So just for this show and for someone that's listening, if someone's out there interested in buying their meat direct from a farmer, are there things that they should be looking for, asking their farmer or rancher to make sure it's a good place to source from?
Yeah. What are your animals eating? Where do you process your animals? What are your practices? I think there's a lot of really great people going to farmers markets and selling products, and I think most of them are. There are people I've run into that started going to farmers markets, and I remember I met one guy, and he said he was selling grass-fed beef, and all he was really doing was taking his calves off of his mamas that were on a grain-based diet, and the calves probably were getting some of that. And then he would slaughter them and go sell them at a farmer's market. They weren't really ever, and frankly, I mean, the quality of the meat probably wasn't that great because they were really young, but they weren't really raised in a way that they weren't grown on a grass-based forage program, and there's a lot of producers like that kind of give grass-fed beef a bad name because they don't do a good job of it. But you got to ask a lot of questions. I talked to one guy once. I visited a farm, and I was just asking him, like, he would advertise his product as organic, not certified, but he'd tell people it was organic. And so he showed me all this wheat that he was planting for the cattle. And I just asked him, I was curious, like, is that wheat organic? And he's like, well, as far as I'm concerned, it is. And we don't use certified organic seed. I mean, we don't spray anything on our pasture, so I don't feel the need to buy organic seed for planting. But the point is, you just got to ask, because people make assumptions about what they think is true about a product, and a lot of times those are wrong. So
yeah, I feel like it's probably pretty easy to sniff out some red flags if you can ask some of those basic questions. Like one of the ones that we've been told is like, if you can just go ask and say, hey, can I go check out your farm operation? And if they say no, it's like, oh.
Yeah. Then they're probably going to Costco and putting their sticker on the meat or something.
Yeah.
No, I think the bigger, the bigger issue is when you're at like a big grocery store and you're buying grass-fed beef, meat can be grass-fed and grown in a feedlot still.
Yeah.
And so I think people just need to understand that stuff. And again, like sometimes you got to choose the least worst thing, the least bad thing, depending on where you are, what you're doing. You may live in a place, a food desert where there's no farmers markets and they've got some grass-fed option at the store, and that may be the best thing you can get that day. And so, I definitely don't want to take a stance that, small farms like ours are the shit and you should never buy anything else. Some people need to.
Right.
And there's a lot of hardworking farmers out there that are not, on a program that's consistent with what we do that still deserve a lot of credit. But
yeah, the concept of the food desert is interesting. And I was telling you beforehand, I just moved from San Diego to Austin. So I've been in San Diego for the last 10 months. So for me, there aren't a ton of regenerative farms out there. So I just started going to a couple of the local farmers markets just to connect with some ranchers. And there's one right in Little Italy, right in the city of San Diego. That's one of the biggest farmers markets I've ever seen. And for the last couple of weekends, they just haven't had a single rancher there,
Really?
which is interesting. And I'm not sure if it's just not profitable, if they're understaffed, but it's like the farmers market is filled with a lot of these plant-based alternatives and different types of hummuses with seed oils and stuff like that. So it's just kind of interesting to see the state of beef. And I'm assuming there must not be enough demand for the ranchers to even be there because they don't feel the need to be there. It's just interesting.
that is interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of factors that could be at play. I know a lot of farms have trouble getting processing dates at butchers. That was especially a big problem during COVID. But yeah, I can't speak to it, but that's unfortunate if there's not enough demand for beef for those guys to be there, you know?
Yeah. I had a minor temper tantrum one Saturday when I couldn't get any ribeyes.
But one of the things you were mentioning before was the old color of the egg trick. And I feel like that's something that's actually not often talked about.
Yeah.
But people should know kind of the truth behind that and some of like the things just to keep in mind when people are showing you two different eggs. It's like,
yeah, we see that a lot. You know, we're well known for our eggs. We have a dark orange yolk, and we're proud of that. And the overall quality of our eggs is great. We attribute a lot of that to the fact that our hens do forage and they have so much space. But you know, the dark yolk is a result of a high carotenoid diet, and that is achieved both through feeding them an optimized ration that is high in carotenoids, namely the class of carotenoids called xanthophylls, which is high in things like marigold paprika, also alfalfa and lots of leafy greens. And so we mix those things into the feed ration, but we also plant high carotenoid leafy greens seasonally in the pasture. We couldn't grow them, 12 months out of the year. But yeah, we were talking about how, there are people that think that the dark yolk is 100% the result of the grass on the pasture, and that's absurd. And any farm that tells you that is lying to you. You've got to have in order to consistently have that, you've got to consistently have carotenoids in your ration. And there's carotenoids in corn, and that's the corn-based chicken feeds is why most eggs in America have a yellow yolk. And corn is what, drives that. And in some countries, a darker, more orange yolk is more standard.
Interesting.
And I get customers that are like, oh, these are what the eggs are like in Australia where I'm from or whatever. And I'm like, cool. But yeah, it's important to, clarify that.
Is it reflective of a more nutritious egg or?
No.
Gotcha.
Nope, it's not. It's reflective of the concentration of carotenoids in the bird's diet.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Because I think there is that misconception that dark orange yolk equates to it being more nutrient dense.
Yeah.
And I think I've even mistakenly tweeted out that it's because that feeling of buying those eggs from the local farm, and it's just got that like beautiful dark orange hue to it. I'm like, this has to be more nutrient dense, but that's just me bro sciencing it. So
well, you can seasonally, we see it on our pastures. when we're having a really good spring and a lot of our turnips and things like that, and the clovers are really strong, the birds do eat that stuff. And I think our yolks do get a little darker, but you can't consistently achieve that without having a custom milled ration like we have that's, that's got higher carotenoid ingredients in it. Yeah.
I think one of the things we were excited to talk to you about as we got to know your story a bit more was that you actually eat an animal-based diet, and we were chatting about this, that kind of completes the whole picture of you being a farmer out here and really eating this amazingly high-quality food.
Yeah.
I think getting into sort of your background and like nutritional background and how that's evolved over time would be really interesting.
Yeah, dude. I was telling you guys beforehand a little bit about how when I lived in Austin, I was a pretty fit guy. I got really into triathlon for a while and just had a very active lifestyle. And then we moved here to start this like organic farming thing. And I was going to Home Depot every day buying lumber to build chicken houses, and Whataburger's right there. And,
just calling your name.
Yeah. And it's like, you're up till midnight washing eggs. You got to get up at 5 a.m. the next day to work in the pasture and pack birds to take to the butcher or whatever. And you're stressed. And it's just, before you know it, you gain 25 pounds and you're like, crap, I said I'd never let this happen. Here I am. I'm like 40 and, and then, yeah. So I have a lot of awesome customers that have been talking about the animal-based sort of carnivore diet for a long time. And to be honest, initially I was kind of like, this is kind of weird, whatever, but reading more and listening to podcasts about it and just consuming information really kind of opened my eyes to the merits that are definitely there. And what made me really take the leap 100% is I've got periodontal issues. It's basically gum inflammation, chronic inflammation of the gums. And, I'd consumed a lot of information about people that have corrected that problem by switching to an animal-based diet. And so I took the leap there. And yeah, it's great because I produce all this stuff on the farm. So I pretty much just eat meat, organs, eggs from the farm, and then we get fruit and honey and raw dairy locally, and yeah.
And how good do you feel since you've made that transition?
Great. Yeah, I mean, I along with that came like dogs are barking. Excuse me. Along with that came like a greater sense of accountability. It kind of got me just out of that rut where I was like, okay, you know what? This is bullshit. Like, you want to wait for the dog to stop barking?
I think the mics won't pick it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Along with that came a greater sense of accountability that I sort of put on myself. And so, along with doing the animal-based diet, and then I was like, okay, you're going to lift at least twice a week, just twice a week, just for sure twice a week. And then it's like, oh, that's easy. Okay, let's at least do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then it's like, you can probably get Monday through Friday off or in Monday through Friday done. And then that builds on itself. And then you know how that snowballs, right? It's just, you feel good, you look better, you're strong, and you realize that you're on the trajectory you want to be on. And then it's like, there's no stopping you.
Yeah.
So
that momentum.
Yeah. Kind of like reverse some of the things that people think are irreversible, or like, capture that youthful energy just through diet, which is amazing. I don't think a lot of people really tap into that, but
I saw like within, 2-3 months, I looked like I did from eating an animal-based diet and working out like twice a week, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, 45 minutes each time. I achieved what I looked like when I was doing triathlons and working out like hour and a half, 2 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, but eating like cookies and every year. Yeah. And all this shit. So it was crazy. Yeah.
It's amazing. We've talked about that. I think the summer of 2019, I went strict paleo for the first time. And I was like walking every day and lifting maybe once a week, but just really strict, cooking all my meals, a lot of, saturated fats, steak, good quality fruits. And I was like the most shredded that I'd ever been just from eating the right way. Cause your body is just like lapping up all these nutrients that you've never really given it before. So it just shows it's like you can exercise as much as you want, but if you don't have that nutrition piece dialed in, it doesn't really matter. Yeah,
I used to think I would just, because I love running and my knees kind of bug me. So I don't run as much anymore, but I noticed like just, doing some vigorous exercise a few times a week, but staying consistent with what I was putting in my body made a huge difference. It was way easier actually than having to go like hit it 2 hours a day for 6 days a week, I mean, yeah.
And you're also just eating delicious food.
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of the animal-based diets. I hate even calling it a diet because it just feels like it's kind of like the
real foods,
the right foods to be eating. Yeah, real foods. Yeah, you have some fruit in there and some veggies, and but you're just eating delicious food.
All summer, what I eat, I'm still doing this pretty much every day for lunch. Is I eat a pound of our caveman blend with watermelon. Like I'll cut up a watermelon or a cantaloupe or something, and I get excited about that. My wife's like, don't you want to like mix something with that? I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm happy with this. This is great. Yeah. I look forward to this, but yeah.
You ever drizzle a little honey on top of your steak too?
I have, yeah.
It's so freaking good. It's like a cheat code. Is that caveman blend? Is that like the ancestral blend where you grind the organs into the ground beef?
Yeah, it's liver, heart blended with trim, but it's about 20% organ meat. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When did you start getting into the organ meats? Was that something that started with the animal-based diet?
Yeah. Well, yes. When I started eating an animal-based diet is when I actually it's funny because I sold a lot of liver and heart to people and even caveman blend. And I wasn't really eating it myself very much. I just knew there was a demand for it. And my wife would once in a while use it in, a caveman blend in our spaghetti sauce or something. But, I think retraining yourself to look at things in a different way, it takes a little bit of time. Somebody told me if you don't like some food and you eat it, was it 3 or 4 times, your pathways change and your perception of that food changes. And so anyway, being able to kind of just look at food almost as medicine, and realize that you're putting good shit in your body. Like liver, I like liver now. Yeah. The textures is what it is, but you think about what it is and you don't think of it as this slimy, weird organ. You think about it as this like nutrient powerhouse. It makes it a lot easier to want to just, eat it.
Yeah. And that's what food is actually supposed to be, is it's supposed to be nourishment and you're supposed to almost get this surge of energy from it. So like in the beginning, when your palate's not trained to taste liver, you think it's this slimy thing, but then you start to focus on the purpose of actually eating it and you feel so good. And then over time, your palate starts to rewire and adjust.
Yeah.
A book that Harry and I talk about on the show all the time is The Dorito Effect by Mark Schatzker. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before.
Oh, you'd love it.
Oh my gosh. It's so interesting because it talks about nutrition through the lens of taste and flavor and how big food has these flavor houses and food scientists that know the perfect combinations of ingredients and artificial flavor and combine the saltiness with the sweet and all these different textures to get you addicted. So there's almost like this de-wiring of that occurs when you start to go animal-based or eat real food. And then once you get over that, you're craving the caveman beef with the cantaloupe. Into the rest of society, people don't view that as food because we don't know what food is actually. Right. But for someone like you, you're like, no, this has everything that I need on a plate.
Yeah.
But there's like a process to get there.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I had liver, I was like, could not stomach it for whatever reason. Overcooked it.
Yeah.
Terribly prepared. And now it's exactly what you guys are talking about. It's like, no, this is like fresh, grass-fed, grass-finished, like high quality liver. And when I have it, it doesn't even taste like anything now, which is weird.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's like anything else, right? Like jumping in cold water.
Yeah.
Like if you don't ever do it and you have to do it, you're like, you build it up and you don't want to do it and you do it and it kind of sucks. But then if you like, when you're training for a triathlon and maybe you're just getting in every day, even with the wetsuit, that initial shock that kind of the water fills, you get used to it. It's like, it's not that big a deal because it doesn't last that long. And so, yeah. But I would say one of the biggest hesitations I had about carnivore was like, I always felt like I needed tons of fiber in my diet. And I would like eat bran buds or stuff, psyllium and granola every day. I was programmed to think I had to have that every day. Otherwise my system wouldn't work right. And there was like a transition for me to get
The adjustment period.
Yeah. Definitely. It was, and Paul Saladino talks about that, in his stuff. But once you get to the other side of that, it was,
Yeah. It's like your car's only had one type of fuel for, 35, 40 years. And now you're eating a completely different way and giving it new fuel, right?
Yeah.
So naturally it's like, there's going to be some type of an adjustment period there, which I think a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
Are you now in a position where, like, when you're talking to customers at the farmer's market, you're talking about animal-based diets and carnivore diets and nutrition and things like that?
Well, I mean, I'm not qualified to advise people on nutrition, obviously, but and I'm careful not to like get on a soapbox about my experience with it because it works for me, and I'm certainly like into it, but I also don't want to like I don't know. I think sometimes it can be kind of a polarizing conversation, and so like I have a lot of regular customers that are animal based, and we talk about that stuff. And I'll talk about it with other customers, but I don't lead with that. Yeah. I'm hesitant to, I'm just the producer of food. So I kind of want to be a little bit neutral in the sense that I'm not trying to, recruit people or whatever, but certainly like it comes up a lot.
Yeah.
And more people are exploring that, Yeah.
Has it changed how you view anything or do anything on the farm and how you think about raising your animals?
Well, yeah, I mean, I pretty much, the foundation of my diet is the food that we produce here. So, in everything that we do, like we recently transitioned our pork off of a corn and soy based ration, because, makes sense. You want lower polyunsaturated fatty acids in the meat. And a lot of our customers are on carnivore, so that's important to them. And it's important to me too. And we've been doing that with our eggs for a long time. There's no corn or soy in our ration for our laying hens. When we make decisions about how are we going to feed the cattle during a drought, absolutely. We've got to feed hay. That's fine, but the hay we have is, from that we bought when everybody was buying hay is not very good. And so then we've got alfalfa, which is a legume, which is great. And then we've got beet pulp in there, which is a source of energy, carbohydrates for the cattle. But a lot of folks turn to cottonseed or soybean hulls, which again, if you're having the conversation about PUFAs, then it's an important detail, and if that's important to you. So,
yeah.
How much more expensive is it to utilize inputs that are in line with these principles versus using, corn and soy inputs that most conventional farms are using?
I couldn't quantify that right now, but it's not cheap. Yeah, I mean, being a grass finishing program, your hands are definitely tied in terms of like what you can, if you have to source outside feed for the cattle, what you can feed. And then I've got my own set of principles too, right? Like if I was just following Grass-Fed Association guidelines, then there's some things I could do that I personally would choose not to do. Or at least they would be my plan C or D, not my plan B. Because obviously you can't let your livestock go backwards and suffer. Unfortunately, we had a bad drought we're still in the middle of, but it wasn't so bad that I wasn't able to get alfalfa and source hay and the things that we needed to kind of keep things on track. But it's not cheap and it's hard and it takes a lot of strategy and planning ahead of time, because I'm sitting here right now thinking about what I'm feeding the cattle in 6 months, right? Like that's kind of constantly how the process works. Yeah.
Do you have to create like a local network of other farms that can help support you when things don't go exactly as planned in terms of droughts and seasonality and things like that?
Sure. Yeah, we produce hay on our farm, but we end up having to source hay in a year like this from, neighbors, other ranchers that have an excess from a previous year. And we definitely have tight relationships with a lot of other producers in the area and producers that aren't necessarily producing a product that's, in line with the stuff that we're producing, grass-fed, pasture-raised, whatever. But again, still great people, and we work together.
Yeah.
I think you'd said that when we were doing the tour, that there are a number of other farms. Well, you'll take their cattle from like 800 to 1,000 pounds. Is that right?
Yeah. So we are a grass finishing operation, and so We have right now just 2 farms, large ranches that we work with that have no antibiotic, no hormone, no grain program. And we will, and they have actually really excellent forage programs. I've actually learned a lot from these guys in terms of planting forages and making baleage, silage, which is what we do here as well. And so we'll source calves at, 700-800 pounds and then take them up to 1,000-1,100 pounds if we can get them there and process them at that point.
How much more effort is it to take the cow from 800 to 1,000 or 1,100 pounds on all grass versus like, corn or soy or grain?
Dude. Well, we don't see the daily gains that you'd get in a feedlot on a high grain ration. Those guys are getting over 3 pounds a day gain. We're happy if we get 1.5, 2 pounds a day gain. 2 is kind of high. I mean, so I'll never have a calf that competes with a feedlot calf in terms of size. I don't have the time to wait. And, and frankly, like that's not the product we're selling. And I have this conversation with older ranchers quite a bit where they're like, man, you gotta, you need to be getting 1,400 pounders or 1,500, and it's like, I try to get them to understand, like, that's not the product I'm selling. My customers want a good eating experience, but first and foremost, they want nutrient-dense, clean, healthy food. And it's a good eating experience, but it's not going to be like the most heavily marbled Wagyu corn-fed steak you ever had. That's not what I sell. Mm-hmm. That's not what I'm here for, and that's not what I want to eat.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because it's really hard for a lot of these guys to get that into their head that like, there are people out there that, buy a steak based on things other than how marbled is it and how cheap is it, Do
you think it helps having that perspective as like a first generation rancher? You're kind of coming in from a different lens as maybe some of these guys have been doing it or got the business from their parents or whatever it is.
Yeah, because if you grow up doing something a certain way and you see that it works and it pays the bills and, then you're probably going to be likely to continue that.
Right.
I will say there's a lot of young farmers and ranchers that grew up doing it that have seen the light and understood that there are other practices out there and that are effective. And again, that Gabe Brown's book Dirt to Soil chronicles a lot of different people's stories on that path. But yeah, for sure. I mean,
the concept of price and cost with our food is interesting. And it's something that we explore a lot on the show because, the natural tendency for a customer that's starting to get into this is, Sam, this all sounds great, but why am I going to pay, $9, $10 for a pound of ground beef when I could go to HEB and pay $6 for the same ground beef, which of course we know is not anywhere near the same.
Right.
And you are paying for it in a different way. So I'm sure that that's probably been interesting for you just to, go through that process and try and teach customers about all the inputs and the way that you guys raise your animals and there's a cost associated with that if you want things done the right way.
Well, yeah. And if you think about like how much money those people are spending on other garbage that they don't need.
Oh my gosh.
It's
insane.
Quality over quantity, right? So yeah, I had one guy come to me at the farmer's market before and he went off on me about, well, why is your beef more expensive than the stuff at HEB? Because grass is free. And, it was like, obviously he was just trying to start shit. And, truthfully, like if people are too hung up on it, then they're not our customer.
No.
And that's okay. I'm not here to force anybody's hand. But you didn't see a Ferrari in my driveway, so it's not like we're, making money hand over fist. It's expensive to produce food this way, but people got to ask themselves, like, how much food do I need and how much quality am I getting for all the food I'm buying? So, yeah.
We had Joel Salatin on the podcast and he talked about how healthcare costs and food prices have inversed and flipped. It's like, you kind of have to think about those two things in the same lens, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he's a smart guy. That's a good point. It's a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my meds alone for when I had colitis were $400K a year for infusions and started eating a carnivore animal-based diet. And now I'm no longer dependent on those medications. So spending a few extra dollars for the best quality food versus being dependent on some medication that's costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's really a no-brainer. We're just not trained as a society, unfortunately, to think like that.
Yeah.
And that's what we're passionate about, is just trying to, even if it's just one person that listens to this podcast and really understands the value of food and what food is actually supposed to be. It's supposed to be this nourishing tool that's really an investment, where it's like you change your diet, like you're talking about, you're going animal-based. Okay, beautiful. Now you have more energy to be out on the farm, and maybe you can, get more eggs or do more things. And like, that's literally putting more money into your pocket, which is tangible. And then there's the intangible thing of like you as a father now having more energy to like play catch with your son or play with your daughter. Now we're talking priceless investments, all from changing your food.
And that's when I think about a lot, is, what kind of future do you want to be able to have with your kids and stuff? Like, I want to be 70 years old climbing 14ers with my kids,
Absolutely.
And going fly fishing in Wyoming or whatever, and, I remember my grandpa taking me fishing when he was 70, and he had an oxygen tank and could barely get to the side of the lake. And, and he was pissed at himself because he knew what he had done to himself. And that wasn't, he was a heavy smoker, but also ate a really, actually a way better diet than a lot of people these days eat, but still, yeah. So you think about those things, and you think about, the habits you're forming now and how they're going to impact you later.
Has it been cool getting to see the farm through your kids' eyes and how they experience it?
Well, yeah. They're just getting to the age where we're letting them go get on their bikes and just leave. And there's a lot of room out here to go ride bikes. And there's another kid that lives on the farm, one of the families that helps us here. And it's great to see them have the freedom to go ride their bikes down to the creek, down the road, go to the tree house where the pond is. My son the other day and we've just started doing this, but my son the other day was complaining my wife and I needed to go back and pack coolers for the farmer's market or something. And he didn't want to come with us. And I said, well, go get your fishing pole and go to the pond. He's like, really? So just watch out for snakes. I've told you enough times now. He's 6, but he knows more about nature than I did when I was 15,
It's incredible.
So that's pretty cool. And that's what we wanted at the core, when we decided to move out here and had the motivation to do it. I grew up in the suburbs of Houston, and there was a lot of undeveloped land and woods and creeks. And I was fishing and riding my bike and climbing trees and, getting hurt and, building BMX dirt jumps or whatever. And where we lived in Austin, that just wasn't going to be an option for our kids. And so to see them doing that now is great. And in the context of the farm, they're still a little young to really add a whole lot of value in terms of helping. But yeah, they're getting there. Django just raised a calf for the county fair, and he was out in the barnyard every morning, bottle feeding it and, halter breaking it and stuff. And so, yeah.
I know one of the things that you had mentioned is how they've lived most of their life out on this farm at this point, and they've been exposed to death, which a lot of other children haven't been able to. And you had mentioned for you and your wife, that was a really impactful thing when you first came out here, having to actually, butcher these animals that you're raising, and you're putting care into them. So maybe you could just touch on that. I think that would be an interesting perspective of just like, dealing with death and that whole process as a farmer and a rancher.
Yeah, it's a crazy thing. I always kind of hypothesized that the increase in the number of vegans that I run into must have something to do with how disconnected our society is and has been for the last, several decades from, where our food comes from, and specifically meat. People have an emotional response to the idea of an animal dying and eating it. And a lot of the same people who have an emotional response to the idea of killing something and eating it, let's say shooting a deer and then skinning it on the porch and putting it in the freezer, will happily go to the store and buy a steak and not think twice about it.
Yes.
And then there are some people who won't even do that and won't eat animal products or whatever. And again, more power to them if that's what they want to do. But moving out here, I really wanted to strengthen that connection and establish that connection for us, but for our kids too. Because, I grew up in the suburbs. I never, raised an animal and ate it. I didn't really do much hunting as a kid. We fished a little bit. And so, it wasn't super familiar to me. And yeah, I remember our first Thanksgiving here, we had some turkeys we'd raised, and I went out and kids were with me, and we harvested the turkey, and the kids helped pluck it, and we gutted it. And that's the turkey we ate for Thanksgiving. And they were little, but it was like, that kind of set the stage. And while we don't want the kids to, we want them to be exposed to the concept of an animal dying for us to eat it. We also want them to be respectful of that because it's a sacred thing. And so, my son, he's little, we do hunt hogs and stuff on the farm. We have to. And, I'm hesitant to introduce him to death in the sense of doing it for a reason other than for food at this age. But yeah, it's.
How do you go about thinking about that in terms of, you mentioned the word like sacredness, like how do you teach that? Because I do feel like it's one of those things where you if you grow up around it, you can kind of like lose some of that. But
yeah,
when you're getting an intimate relationship with it, either through like hunting or butchering your own animals, kind of feel that.
With kids, I think, we're still figuring out how to be parents, but repetition, a constant, just consistent messaging. And, we had raccoons that decimated one of our laying hen flocks. And so we had to trap some raccoons and then we'd shoot them. And hopefully I don't get beat up for that. But, I took my son out one morning to go do that. And I stopped before we even got there. And I said, look, why are we going to kill these raccoons? He's like, well, because they're killing our chickens. I said, that's right. I said, we don't just kill things just to kill stuff. We either kill stuff because it's harming us or something that's important to us, or because we're going to eat it. So I'm trying to drive that home. It's important to me because I'm not a fan of just killing stuff for bloodlust,
Yeah.
So
it's just important to, I think, have these conversations because we definitely have a tendency as a society where it's like, hey, we're meat eaters, but we want to pretend like death doesn't exist. We want to just live in the world where we go to the grocery store and the steak is neatly wrapped in the plastic wrapper and we don't think about where it comes from, but there's so much effort that you and other farmers and ranchers are putting into it. And death is part of that process to produce that product that we're ultimately eating and nourishing ourselves with. And there's, it's not a moral thing. It's just evolution and it's a fact of life is what it seems like listening to you speak.
Yeah. And it's natural. And I forgot what I was going to say, but yeah, it's just a part of the process. And we see it on the farm all the time. I mean, the flip side is, animals don't die great deaths, in nature. So being cognizant of that too is important.
Mm.
Yeah.
You were mentioning before some of the different ways you were thinking about growing the operation as you are continuing to work on the farm. And you mentioned some sheep or lambs on the property, and maybe some like agro-tourism aspects. Could you maybe speak to both those, just how you're thinking about growing it? Because it's cool seeing, from where you started, you were talking about just like, chickens and beef, and now it's kind of this built out operation.
Yeah, we've got pork going now, and we're stoked. Well, I've wanted to do lamb for a long time, and I could see that in our future. I don't know when, but I love, the grazing operations that I'm a fan of, that most of them use sheep as well, white oak pastures and just to name one. And so I'd love to introduce that into our grazing program. I think it'd be really complementary. On the agritourism component, we've been really hesitant to do that for a long time, just because we've been so inundated and buried in the farm operation. But yeah, we're gonna open up. We've got a house in the back of the property. We're gonna start offering on Airbnb or through our website, and have farm tours and stuff like that associated with it. So we're excited to offer that, because there's a lot of people that want to come out and have an experience and see the farm, and it's also kind of a long drive. So, a 90-mile, 100-mile drive to come out for an hour and then turn around is kind of a long way. So hopefully that'll be a good option for people to come and check out the farm and see what it's all about. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, because one of the things that makes us hopeful is that we've noticed, at least since we've started the Meat Mafia brand about a year ago, is that there does seem to be this awakening to where our food is coming from. And I think just the overall situation of COVID breaking people out of their typical routines and waking people up to what's going on. And, the decentralization of food is a big part of that. Mm-hmm. And we've have so many friends and family members that are now starting to make that effort to be intentional to source their food. So I'm just curious, have you started to see those trends as well with your business? And maybe it's the amount of customers you're getting, or even just people that want to come out to the farm and get to meet you and meet your family and stay, and that whole experience.
Yeah, I mean, it's an insane percentage of our customers are coming from that place. COVID really opened people's eyes. I mean, we all know that, right? Supply chains got disrupted. You couldn't get certain things, and people came out of the woodwork and realized there were farms, not that far away, and that was really cool to see. And some of those people stopped when things kind of settled, and then a lot of those people stuck around and kept sourcing from us and other small farms, and nice. And that's been neat. And I see the trend continuing. And I get phone calls every day from people that are on animal based, or they've got some autoimmune issue, and they're triggered by this and that, and they can call me directly and ask me, is this in your feed? Is this part of your practices? And they can, confirm that. It's tougher to do that when you're buying grocery store beef. So
there's basically no way to verify. It's a guessing game.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, in those systems, there's obviously, in any big operation, there's room for fudging, and some percentage of fudging is going to happen and not get found out about, and that's unfortunate, but it's true. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I guess on the other side of COVID has been all this inflation conversation, and obviously everyone's dealing with increased prices.
Yeah.
Have you seen that drive more customers towards you guys in terms of this idea of increasing food security and just wanting to build these relationships with someone who can actually supply food?
We did see an uptick in bulk beef purchases. So people buying whole cow, half cow to stock up their freezer, which is smart. So yeah, on the regular retail transactions, no, I wouldn't say so, but definitely people stocking up, getting a freezer and stuff. I mean, there's been a lot of people in the last 2-3 years that bought land, bought a big freezer, and put a whole cow in it. Yeah. And I think it's smart, it's also just really cool to be able to open your freezer,
Totally.
Yeah.
Just to have that feeling of just knowing you have, basically a year's worth of meat in there, any type of cut that you want.
Yeah.
And even nutritionally, we had on Dr. Bill Schindler, who's an archaeologist and he's an anthropologist as well. And his take on nutrition, especially when it comes to meat eating, is that we shouldn't just be eating the pure muscle meat or eating the ribeyes and the ground beef over and over again. You should be rotating and incorporating different cuts.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know obviously with the, the full half quarter cow, there's a ton of ground beef, but there are a lot of amazing cuts that you can throw in there just to diversify the food you're putting into your body.
Yeah. And that's the other thing, is it kind of nudges people toward getting out of their comfort zone a little bit and trying out ossobuco. Freaking amazing.
Yeah. Amazing.
Just as an example, or whatever, other roasts or cuts. Yeah.
That's one of the things we try to preach a little bit, is just this idea of cooking your own meals when it comes to getting healthier and sourcing better ingredients. It just kind of teaches you that ownership mentality of hey, if the food's going in your body, you should at least take part in some part of the process of the preparation.
Yeah.
Right. Even just starting there is such a high lever tool that you can pull. Even before we talk animal-based carnivore, CrossFit, workout, just start cooking your meals.
Yeah.
Eat the same thing, cook your meals. And I guarantee just controlling those inputs, you'll feel way better.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And thinking before you go out, if you're going to be gone all day and you're going to be hungry, driving past McDonald's and gas station and all this shit, to have, think ahead. I my go-to is always, I get a half pound of brisket if I got it,
Oh yeah.
Can't beat that.
A lot of good barbecue out here.
But, think ahead.
Yeah. and people are going to get pissed at me for saying this, but even just knowing how to eat defensively, like you were telling your Whataburger story, if you don't have anything else, and the best you can do is just go to Whataburger and just crush 4 to 5 patties, like that's still better than 99% of the crap you're going to find out anyway.
Yeah. The only issue is if you go to Whataburger, you have to make sure that you're ready to say no to all the other stuff.
I know, that's the thing.
Yeah, but agreed. Yeah, there's definitely, you have to have those like ways to get out of those tough situations when you know you need to
talking
get
about
some food
what
in.
was the book Dorito Effect?
Dorito Effect. Yeah,
it's like you can walk into Whataburger like and get an iced tea or something. Like, oh, I'm going to get an iced tea. It's hot out. And you're like, I'm not even hungry. It's not going to be a problem. You walk in, you smell it, and then you're like, oh, well, I mean, you know,
I'm here.
Bring on the fries.
Yeah, exactly.
There's something about that smell. You got to get the hell out of there. But,
Right.
Yeah. When we were talking beef in bulk, quarter, half, whole cow, do you guys ship that across the country now?
We are, in November, we'll start shipping nationwide.
Nice.
We haven't figured out the logistics of sending like 375 pound whole cow, but I think we're going to figure that out pretty soon. Right now, what we offer locally is free home delivery for quarter, half, or whole beef in Austin, Houston, San Antonio, or in between. And so people can get that on the website. But yeah, we're excited to start shipping, outside of Texas. We've been limited because we use a state inspected butcher primarily. And so we're going to start using a USDA butcher so we can, offer stuff to more people. So,
nice.
That's an awesome next step. And then you were also mentioning that you guys opened up the farm stand in Austin for your local community with Bellevue, which is just great that you guys are going to be there, more days than just the farmers market days. So
yeah, I mean, that's the biggest challenge for a business like ours is making, bridging the gap and making it easy for the customer to transact with you. And when they have to be at a certain place one day a week for a 4-hour window to get your stuff, I mean, it's like, that's a pretty narrow slice of the population that's going to go for that. And we're thankful for that narrow slice of the population. But, we said, well, what if on your way to Whole Foods, for example, or H-E-B, whatever, some big store, you look over and you see there's a little shop that's selling steaks and chops and eggs, and we're working on getting milk in there and coffee and, all the staple kind of stuff. Why wouldn't you stop in there if it was important to you to get good stuff? And so, and so it's going great. Yeah. We've got the local pastures store open on South Austin, and it's cool. Hopefully, that'll grow. And yeah.
Well, we can't wait to check that out, because prior to us, we just started buying beef in bulk probably about 2 months ago. But prior to that, it would happen all the time where like I'd be in San Diego and I'm like, shit, I missed to go into the farmer's market on Sunday, but I need steak. So I'm going to like Whole Foods or something like that. So just to have that option where I can go to your store and get beef for the week, it's a game changer.
Yeah. And I mean, we opened that with our friends at Bellevue Farm, Aubrey and Perrin. And so we've got, their duck and pork, all pasture raised, duck, pork, chicken, and then our chicken, beef, and eggs. And then we carry other local products. So yeah.
That's so great. Where else can people come into contact with you guys, whether it's social media or just your guys' website?
Instagram. I think we just set up Twitter recently. And through the website. Yeah. I mean, we're at the farmers markets every week in Austin. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, we truly appreciate you having us out here and letting us in your home. This has been awesome. We've got the full setup here with all the lights.
Yeah, it's great.
It's a little invasive, but we truly appreciate it. And it was awesome just being able to see what you've got going on out here. It's pretty special.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys came. It's good to get to meet you guys.
Yeah, this is great.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.